Let's jump to the story from ABC News. Kansas must stop changing trans people's sex listing on driver's licenses, judge says. A state court judge has ordered Kansas to stop allowing trans people to change the listing for sex on their driver's license. This one caused a lot of contentious issues there on the internet, as many people on the left are saying it's far-right fascism, et cetera, et cetera. But my question with this story is actually quite simple. The reason why I wanted to bring it up in this conversation. If the left continually says sex and gender are different, why would a trans person ever change their sex on a birth certificate or driver's license when they are not, in fact, changing their sex? They are just they're trying to affirm or confirm their gender, which is a social construct.
Yeah, well, right. This is how it started. They created this nonsensical distinction between sex and gender. Gender is a term that was only used to describe language. So they took something that only referred to inanimate objects, or I shouldn't even call it an object, but an artifact of language, and they applied it to humans, which already has dehumanizing connotations to it.
Well, hold on. They didn't do that. We did it because of what words naturally acquired meaning.
No. Hold on. John Money coined the term gender identity. This was an
absolutely,
invention.
And then on government documents, it'll ask you your gender, not your sex.
Yes.
So it's not referring to the male or female nature of a word. Mm-hmm. It eventually came to mean biological sex.
Exactly. So what happened was, because people were uncomfortable saying sex and wanted a euphemism, they would just say gender instead. So in some instances, it was used interchangeably, and then sometimes it was used to say, well, your sex and gender identity are two different things, because your sex is the biological reality and your gender is the expression. And they said that for a very long time to get people to accept transgenderism, but now they've pushed the two back together. And what do they say? Oh, actually, your gender is also your biological sex, because if you say this is what you are, we have to also say that that's what your biological sex is.
So the issue here is there is a reason why we ask for the sex of the individual, typically for medical reasons. I mean, that's basically it. We can see the picture of your face on the card. If we want to know it's you, we'll look at the picture on your face. The reason sex is listed is literally in case someone needs to identify your biology and they can't tell. Some people are naturally feminine looking and some women are naturally masculine looking. There are instances where people are androgynous. And so let's say you have a heart attack and you collapse. Medical person's going to come in, they have an ID on them, they're going to look at your ID and be like, okay, they're female. Okay, we know a bit about their body. It's going to be different from a male body.
Yep.
Changing it does nothing to inform anyone of anything. Quite the opposite, actually. So if the real issue is they want to affirm their gender, and they believe gender and sex are different things, to the point where there are non-binary people simply because they don't want to wear a suit or a dress, then why would you ever change sex on a government document?
Yeah, well, because you constantly need the constructions of your own mind to be validated, and you constantly need a grievance, so you're just going to keep pushing it down the line, saying like, well, you've accepted my gender identity, but you don't accept my sex. I mean, it's all nonsense, but you're absolutely right. You need to know a person's sex medically,
this is
especially
why,
if they're unconscious and they can't communicate it to you, like you described. Different medicines might be able to be used in a specific situation, but not another one, like depending on your sex. It's also true of dosages of medicines.
Well, so this is the one of the principal identifiers of it being a cult. The left adheres to things that make no sense for no reason other than you must. That's it. The larger group agrees on a concept, and you must fall in line with whatever the majority of that cult believes and does, even if it serves no purpose or makes no sense. If you disagree, in fact, this is actually probably the principal component of the cult, the ultimate test. Will you agree to something that is not true? Yes or no? And so as you can see, many of these people will come out and say, gender and sex are different. And you'll say, okay. And they'll say, also, a person can change their sex. And you're like, wait, hold on. If a person is gender fluid, their gender can change. And if a person wants to get gender confirmation surgery, they are confirming their gender, not their sex. You are now conflating sex and gender as a single thing while simultaneously arguing. And you've challenged us, exposing yourself. I think to a great degree, the point of holding contradictory claims is so that people who aren't falling in line with the cult expose themselves.
Exactly. What do you feel about this? Do you think this is a horrible, bigoted thing?
I think it's ridiculous. I mean, it's all about their affirmation, and they need to, everyone needs to confirm what they are, but it's definitely two different things. And medically, I mean, it's important to know when somebody arrives in the emergency room and there's, a problem, there's different, ways to go about approaching the patient. So, yeah, I mean, I think
different medications.
Yeah. or even like CPR, I think is a little bit different, or there's all kinds of different things. But this is just it's right. You're right. It's a cult, and it's either you go in lockstep with what they say, or you're bumped out. Which is why I think the lady you had on earlier, that's great that she finally But it only took one thing. It only took one thing for her to go against, and then that was
apparently
it.
it's been a couple of years.
Oh, so
and she's finally like, okay, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
I wonder how far off we are from them just removing the sex category from a driver's license and having you put your pronouns there, and that's it. That's all we need to know.
Pronouns are also another thing. It's all meant to identify you as a part of the cult. Mm-hmm. That's really it.
I think I think it also adds to that element of there being a humiliation requirement or humiliation ritual. I mean, before this ideology infested everything, the idea that you would ask someone whether you should call them he or she would be and should be considered incredibly insulting.
Right.
What are you talking about?
Well, hold on,
you can't
bro.
tell?
I would welcome anybody. There's a meme going around where it's like, I tried the Lizzo test. That's what they called it.
Oh no!
And they like my aunt started crying. They basically said he said he went up to his aunt and said in a polite way, "You look like a trans woman," and he said his aunt started crying.
That's mean.
And he was like, but she was very liberal and very pro-trans and was arguing and saying all this stuff. And then he said something like, "Well, you look like a trans woman." And then she got really angry and started crying. And his point was like, "Why are you crying? If you like and respect trans women and you think they're good and beautiful, why would you cry if someone called you that? Because they're lying. They're in a cult."
Yep.
She knew he wasn't calling her brave.
Right.
Yeah. That's not what that implies.
Yep. So I'm kind of thinking about this. Like in the future, I'm not going to ask someone if where they are politically. I'm going to say, are you in the cult or not in the cult? Mm-hmm. And then just see what they say. Because I've had like liberal family members be like, "You're saying that I'm in a cult because I disagree with you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm saying you're in a cult because you believe things that are contradictory and you're too afraid to say anything against the contradictions because people will attack you and you fear that." Yeah, see, other people will be like, "That quite doesn't make sense," whether or not they get attacked. One is free, knowing freedom is dangerous, and the others are scared into saying things that don't make sense and contradict themselves, like 2 + 2 = 5, out of fear of what might happen to them socially. One's a cult, one's not.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean,
choose.
we in all of us disagree on certain things. I don't think we've ever really like accused each other of being cult members on the basis of those disagreements. So the idea that we're just gonna claim anyone who's outside of our values is a cult member is ridiculous. It's not about that. Like, this is a particularly strange set of values that have incredibly strict standards.
It's not even a set of values, dude.
Well, values
we've-
is a term that can just refer to what somebody like literally values, and the things they value are very bizarre.
When we had a particular leftist on this show, we're talking about these books, these shockingly gratuitous books in schools.
Yeah.
And she goes, "So you're in favor of abstinence-only sex ed?" And I was like, "No." And she was, "Oh." I'm like, "Because you're in a cult, right? You can't comprehend contradictions. It's all just." Anything the left says must be true no matter what, and anyone who disagrees must be the other.
With me or against me. That's
right.
But look at who you I mean, it is worth taking into consideration who you were dealing with, and the point of them being.
But that's most of these people. Well, they're not. Look, there are intelligent political commentators. Hey, surprise, surprise! They tend to fall in a similar set of beliefs. We can talk about Destiny, a liberal guy, but he has no issue coming here and having a discussion because he actually believes things and is having a real conversation about them.
Yeah.
Then you have cult members who will say literally anything so long as it fits the cult narrative.
Right.
It's not about politics.
Yeah, like Destiny would look at the information and he'd change his opinion. He's not going to like totally be disingenuous. He'll look at something, see facts and see numbers and be like, "Oh, okay, you're right about that." Whereas many other people would look at the numbers or just completely look beyond them. So
when you mention the people we're talking to, there's a reason why when we have Destiny on and have this conversation, it's not generating millions of clips and millions of views. And when we have a cult member on, it does.
Yeah.
Because Destiny's not a cult member.
Exactly.
And so people are not. He may as well be considered right wing at this point.
Well,
but seriously, your political positions do not determine whether or not you are left or right anymore.
yeah, I mean, as long as you anger that group to some extent, they're going to label you far right. Not just right wing, but like far right and fascist.
If you say that Joe Biden, there is evidence that he engaged in corrupt activities, insert whichever one, you are now conservative. If you make a movie criticizing child trafficking, they call it a conservative movie.
Yes.
They call it faith-based, religious. It's Sound of Freedom was just a movie.
They call it
law
QAnon fodder, and it's pro QAnon, and it's what else do they say about it? That it's for dads with brain worms or something. I think that was the Rolling Stone review that was published.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I wonder why people connected to Hollywood are so concerned about a movie that sheds
Sure.
awareness on child trafficking becoming popular.
But this is the point. There's nothing political in the movie. Nothing.
No, not really,
It's a
no.
law enforcement agent tracking down criminals and saving kids.
But you know what else? And here's the thing. You're correct that that's not political, but to them it is. Not only for some of the more nefarious reasons we could point to, but just portraying law enforcement in a positive
Yeah.
light is already a
that's
massive issue for them.
Yeah, true.
Sure.
It does speak to the fact that the left does politicize everything, and there are going to be people that, or there would be people that would push back on that and say, well, Phil, the right does it too, or whatever. But if you look at the philosophy of the left and the thinkers on the left, the idea of the personal is political came from the left. Like that's what the early feminists were saying. I think it was the feminists that first started saying the personal is political, and it's something that expands to other types of leftism or other genres of leftism or whatever. The LGBT issues that we see right now are because they demand sexuality to be a political topic. It doesn't have to be. It could be simply, look, you don't teach children, sex ed, possibly at all, because, human beings have figured it out for couple 100,000 years that human beings have been human before we had, government schools. So it's not like it's necessary to ensure the survival of the population for the government to explain how sex works. That's not necessary at all. But the reason to have these things in school is because they can be made political. If you can cast something in a political light and make young people start asking political questions when they're 10, 11, 12, then you can make activists out of them. And that's the goal. The intent is to make activists out of kids. So whether it be LGBT issues or whatever the dynamic is, whether it be race issues or whatever, anytime you can get young people activated politically, you're going to get a portion of them that are going to become committed political actors, and they're going to become the activists of the next generation and stuff. And so the point is to politicize as much as possible from the left with leftist talking points or with leftist perspectives. That's why you have your average mom and dad that are like, hold on, we don't want our kids to learn this stuff. And the government's, sending the FBI after them, because that's literally what happens. I haven't made up one thing. All of that stuff is factual things that have happened. So again, I'll get pushback from some of the people that are friends of mine that are left leaning, and it's like, look, I'm not making any of this up. This is just talking about things that are happening and have happened. So, and I think so. The idea that the personal is political is something that lives on the left.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with a lot of that. I would say that, and I don't think you would actually disagree, that there are some, and probably many massive goals with showing this stuff to kids that go beyond just a mere political statement.
Yes,
but I will.
But those
add,
are opportunists. I think
those are. I think it's a mixture. I think they're opportunists, but I think there actually are people who want to uphold like a kind of systemic grooming. And I'll also add here that the reason we have sex ed of any form, firstly, I don't think it's going to shock anyone to hear me say I think this is something that parents should be doing and not schools. But the whole reason we have these programs is to tell people what not to do. People are going to figure out what they can do with their bodies, all right? You have to tell them what they're not supposed to do. So to show them a bunch of perverted stuff that they hadn't considered is not sex ed. That is grooming. The purpose of sex ed is boundaries. Don't do this thing. Don't do this till you're married. Even like the more comprehensive programs, by the way, which I don't agree with that terminology. I don't agree with teaching kids about birth control, but even they'll say, don't do this without birth control. Like the whole point is supposed to be about saying, don't do this.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.